Endurance Junkie Podcast, episode 20. Hey Junkie, what's up? Welcome to another episode of the Endurance Junkie Podcast, the show where I will be interviewing some of the fastest, smartest, and most inspiring people active in the endurance world today. Joining me now is Matt Fisher, and Matt is what you can call a typical age group triathlete, managing his work, his family, and training all into a pretty busy schedule. He's been active since 2009, has gone on to represent Great Britain as an age group athlete, and his goal in the sport now is just simply to be the best possible triathlete he can be without the sport dictating his life. Matt, thanks for taking the time to chat here today. For those of us who don't know you, can you tell us a bit about yourself, your sporting background, and how you ended up in triathlon?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Peter. I feel a little honoured and out of place given some of the other guests that you've had on, but I guess to introduce myself, I'm really what you would call as a classic mammal, and for those of you that don't know the acronym, that's a middle-aged man in lycra. I'm a 41-year-old male who's refusing to grow old gracefully, and I did my first duathlon in 2009, and I've been competing in triathlon since 2010. I was pretty sporty at school, but after university I did the usual thing and got into work and let my fitness drop, and I guess I found myself waking up one day, age 37, feeling overweight and out of shape, and I wanted to turn that round. So I travel a lot with business, and I happened to take 2 trips to Auckland and San Francisco, where I happened just to see some triathlons happening and didn't really know what they were, but I was inspired. So I came home from Auckland, I bought myself a road bike, and well, the rest is history.
What sports were you involved in as a kid then?
So I played the typical English public school games of rugby. I was a very keen fencer. I was ranked in England for sabre, and I swam, which is kind of handy for triathlon.
Yeah. Any good in these sports? Just fencing was you were ranked there.
Yeah, my rugby, I was good at barking orders, so I always made team captain, but it was never the A team. So I think my hand-to-eye coordination wasn't so great, but my fencing was good, and my swimming and water polo were pretty strong. I'm not a big guy, but I'm a fairly strong guy.
Cool. All right, so the reason why I'm having you on today is because you're what we can call a typical triathlon age grouper with a full-time job and a family to manage as well. How many training hours are you able to fit in per week on average, and maybe can you break it down per sport?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, because of the travel, which we'll probably talk about in a little bit, there is not really any such thing as a typical week, but on a good week, I can get in 14 or 15 hours training. I try to make sure I get a minimum of 10, but I do have to play with time down to parenting duties and work duties. Right now, I'm kind of in the off season, and I'm enjoying that immensely. So I'm down to about 7 or 8 hours of training, and I'm just having fun, which is really nice. Yeah, it's nice not to have any structure. But when I'm in proper training, I try to do probably 3.5 hours of swimming a week, maybe 5 hours of running, and 5 hours on the bike. And the approach is different for each of the 3 sports. My swimming, for example, lots of intervals, lots of sprint sessions, and not very much steady swimming. Whereas on the bike and the run, quite a lot of steady work and relatively little in the way of strength or speed work. I definitely keep to that 80-20 rule, where 80% of my running and cycling is pure aerobic work, and only 20% is the speed work.
Yeah, cool. Well, you mentioned it before, traveling is a bit of a problem for you, work-related. How does it affect your training, and how can you continue your training despite all the travel?
Yeah, I think in a way we're lucky that we're triathletes and we have 3 sports to choose from. I think if I was just a cyclist or just a swimmer, I would find it more difficult. But thankfully, even when I'm just flying with carry-on luggage, I can always throw a pair of run shoes and run kit in my carry-on luggage. So it doesn't really matter where I'm going, I can always run. I spend a lot of time in Stockholm, and actually Stockholm's quite run-friendly, which is really great. It's getting a bit cold now, so I'm very grateful for my Endurance Junkie merino top and beanie. They are definitely must-have essentials at the moment. But yeah, running's okay. The cycling, most hotels don't have great gym bikes, unfortunately. So you tend to sit there and you turn the legs over, and you can get an aerobic workout, but generally I try to keep my speed and my strength work for when I'm back at home and can either get out on the road, or I have a watt bike in my man cave, and that's again a great piece of kit. Swimming's by far the most difficult to do. When I'm in Austin in Texas, there's a great open air pool called Barton Springs, and I love going there. But it's quite rare to find a good swimming venue when you're just in town for a couple of days.
The hotel in Stockholm doesn't have that.
No, I'm sure Stockholm has some great pools somewhere, but I'm yet to find them. So really, I work with my coaches to try to structure my training plan to accommodate my work travel, and they're very good at working with me on that. So we basically just work it so that if I know I'm going to be away and I know I don't have access to a pool or a bike, we will just focus on the run, and we'll have a heavy few run days, and then I'll make up for it by focusing on the bike and the swim but when I'm back in the UK.
Yeah, cool. But you talk about coaches, so you have multiple ones?
Yeah, I'm lucky enough to work with two really good coaches. I work with a guy called Mark Shepherd for cycling and running, and then a chap called Adam Gibson of Greenlight PT for swimming. They're really different guys and with very different styles, but I really like working with them both. I think a great example of where a coach can make a great difference is when I started working with Adam earlier this year, I was really struggling to regain my swim form from last year. I kind of plateaued and wasn't making great progress. And Adam built me a plan which wasn't really that onerous. It was just a very clever plan that over the course of about 6 weeks, I shaved about 20 seconds off my 400 meter TT time. So I think that is a great example of how a coach who knows their stuff and understands their athlete can make a real difference to your performance.
Yeah, definitely. If they can make it work to work around your travel arrangements. So you said you picked up the sport in 2009, had your first triathlons in 2010, and you've since then represented Great Britain a couple of times in age group world champs. Can you tell us a bit about those events and how does it feel to represent your country?
Yeah, it's not that I'm counting, of course, but I've managed to wear the blue suit 4 times now in Ireland, China, New Zealand, and at home in the UK. And they are quite different to your average age group race or 70.3 or what have you, because triathlon's a solo sport, and typically it's just you against everybody else in the field. And if you're really lucky, you've got your mum and dad and your wife or your son there at certain points around the course to give you a bit of a cheer. The last year when we did the ITU age group world champs in London, the difference was there were Brits literally every foot of the course on the bike and the run, and they're all shouting "Go GB" or "Go Matt" or shouting out your surname, and that's an amazing feeling. So they are a different kind of race, and of course you've got a bit of national pride. So there's definitely more of a team feeling to those kinds of races than your average triathlon. So I really liked it. I've enjoyed my time in the blue suit. I think my time in the blue suit is probably over for a little while, and we can talk about why that is. But I've definitely been very proud to be part of the GB age group team, and I would encourage others to try and enjoy that experience.
Yeah, I think you were alluding to the blog post that you wrote on your website, triathletesdiary.com. Called "In Defense of the Blue Suit." Apparently there's, I don't know, some mockery or something involved with people that are representing Great Britain. Yeah,
I think, if we look at, let's just take Ironman for an example. When you race an Ironman or a 70.3, the rules on how you get to the World Championships are quite simple. You have a number of slots available per age group and at each race, and if you're lucky enough to fill one of those slots, then you get the option to pay your entry fee and take your slot at the World Championships. It's a fairly simple system. ITU age group racing is very different in that it's all about qualifying within your country and then representing your country at the age group World Championships. So each country that sends people to these ITU age group World Championships has their own selection policy. And in Great Britain, the British Triathlon Federation has a policy of sending as many athletes to these championship races as they can. And that can often be sort of 20 or so athletes, which is quite a lot when you consider that's per sex, per age group. I think we've had like 400, 500 people go from Britain to various champs before now. The danger, of course, with that policy is that not all of those 20 guys in that age group are going to be super, super fast athletes. And that's partly because there probably aren't 20 super, super fast guys in the UK anyway. But it's also because this is an amateur sport. We're self-funded, and therefore there is an element of the people that go to these world championships, especially when they're in China or New Zealand or Canada, go because they can afford to go. So a lot of talented guys simply can't get there. And I think when you have those two elements together, it means that the team that you send is great in one point because it's an inclusive team. And I think the BTF has to be applauded for the inclusivity approach that it takes. But it's not necessarily the strongest team you could send. And so when you look at the British professional team and you look at the Brownlees and you look at Jodie Stimpson and people like that, they're incredibly strong athletes and we're right up there with the world leaders. However, at the amateur level, not many of our guys can live up to that. And especially when you're looking at not the guys in the top, taking the top 5 slots out of 20, but the guys down in 15, 16, 17, they're not going to be the most fantastic athletes. They're going to the world champs because they're there to fulfill a personal ambition. And it's their goal to be there. And I think from that point of view, who are we to say that that isn't a really good thing to do? I think if it's a personal goal, it's entirely down to you to be proud of yourself for achieving it. But it does mean that occasionally at races, you see quite a few union flags towards the bottom of the age group rankings because we've sent 20 people, whereas Canada or the US or Mexico or somebody else has only sent 4 or 5 athletes who are probably slightly better. So I think some people in the triathlon community in the UK see that and just think it looks bad on the UK. It's not a sentiment I personally agree with, but I see where they're coming from. So I think that combined with the fact that some guys who get the blue suit let it go to their heads a little does lead to some of this mockery that's out there. And as I say, I see it from both sides. I think some of the mockery is fair play because if you're in the age group team, that's great, but you're still an amateur. You're not a professional, and please accept that. But if you get in the age group team, by all means, be proud of that.
Yeah, I can definitely see that it's that it can be important for some athletes, and I think it's also a sign that the British Federation is doing extremely well. I mean, if they can afford to send that many amateur athletes.
Well, bear in mind we're self-funded, of course, so we actually have to pay the BTF to go as much as we have to pay the ITU to take part in the race. So, as I say, there is quite a large element of it's only the guys that can afford to go that do go. But as you just said, the BTF actually is being commercially quite savvy. It's making money from the age group races, which, commercially kind of makes sense at the end of the day because they can plow that money into the professional program. So I think some of us feel like we could get more from the BTF, and I think there's an argument for that. But I also think that the BTF has to be applauded for the inclusivity, that it's promoting, and the fact that it's taking the money that's available. Which commercial organization wouldn't do that? We only have to look at the furore around the WTC and the pro races at the moment to see that there's a distinct separation between what necessarily might be sporting and what's commercial, and the two don't always marry perfectly.
Yeah, cool. So is that like one of the reasons why, because you qualified for the 70.3 World Champs this year and also the European middle distance races, but you decided not to race in either one of them. Did that have to do with your decision?
To a small extent. I think my reasons for withdrawing from the two races were actually distinct for each of the races. with the 70.3 World Champs, if I'm honest, I didn't really expect to qualify this year. This year in my mind was a build year. And so when I qualified for the 70.3 World Champs in Mallorca, it was a really nice surprise. Mallorca's a really tough race, as in the field is usually very strong. So I had no expectation to take a slot there. So that was great. But as the year progressed, I kind of started to have my own self-doubts about whether I was going to perform at the level that I wanted to perform in Canada. Some of my training hadn't gone as well as I would like it to go. And I didn't want to spend 3,000 euros or, 4,000 euros going to a race in Canada where I was just there to make up the numbers. I think my pride wouldn't have allowed me to do that, and certainly my bank balance didn't want me to do that either. So with the 70.3 World Champs, I just decided that this wasn't the year to do it. With the ETU Middle Distance Champs, there is that slight feeling of the stigma that's coming with the GB age group at the moment, and I just want to step away from that scene for a little while and perhaps get my own head clear on what I really think about it. I have no problem with people that want to race it, but I don't think that's where my head is at the moment. I was almost quite fortunate in that I didn't choose to go to the World Championships this year, because only a week after the race in Canada, there was a 70.3 in Denmark, which a business partner of mine very kindly gave me an entry to. And being that it was a lot closer, I managed to get over there very cheaply in race and took a slot for next year's World Championships. So while a week after I should have been competing in the 2014 World Championships, I've qualified for the 2015 Championships. So on the one hand, I've proven to myself it's not a fluke and that I deserve my place at the Champs. But I've also kind of bought myself a lot of breathing space, because next year the Champs are in Austria, they're closer to home, they'll be cheaper to get to, and I've got 10 months to get ready for it. So right now my focus is really strongly on making sure that I'm in a really good place to compete at next year's World Champs.
Must be a nice feeling to go into the off season knowing that your main focus for next year is already in the bag.
Yeah, I don't know how other people listening to the podcast will feel, but I kind of tend to go into the off season slightly scared. And I mean that in that I know the body needs a rest and I know I need to sit back, but psychologically I find it quite difficult to deal with the idea that I'm going to lose fitness, to some degree or another. And part of me is like, that's the last thing I want to do. I want to keep pushing through. Whereas this year, I think because I've got that qualification in the bag, I've been able to say, do you know what? I am going to relax for a few weeks. I am not going to train for 2 weeks, and I'm going to go out and eat pizza or whatever I want to do. And psychologically, as much as physically, that's been fantastic. So I really am now getting to the point where I'm ready to start training again. And I've got my motivation back to resume my training. So yeah, it's a really nice feeling.
Yeah, cool. And besides a holiday in Austria next year, you've also got a little break in San Francisco, I read recently.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mentioned right at the top of our chat that one of the things that got me into triathlon originally was I was in San Francisco on a business trip and walking along the shoreline and saw these hundreds of bikes all racked up and these the air bridges and stuff that they have. And I had absolutely no idea what was going on until I saw a load of guys coming out of the water and running towards their bikes and thinking, bloody hell, this is crazy. What are these guys doing? And it wasn't until a couple of years later that I found out that that's the Escape from Alcatraz triathlon. And as soon as I learned what it was, I was like, I've got to do that race one day. That's definitely on my bucket list. So yeah, 2 days ago, I found out that I got my slot for 2015 and yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. It seems crazy to be going all that way for what isn't even a 70.3 distance race, but it's up there. It's a bucket list race. You got to do it.
Hopefully you combine it with a trip from work so that they carry the expenses.
You read my mind.
So yeah, I guess those are the two goals for 2015. Is Ironman on the bucket list as well?
I keep asking myself the very same question. And others ask me too, and not yet is the very simple answer. the thing, I've kind of gone from sprint to Olympic to 70.3, and what I like about those races is that I honestly feel that I race them. My worry with Ironman, the full Ironman distance, is that I'm not sure I will be able to race them. At least in the first couple, I think there's so much to learn about nutrition, about pacing. You're not just racing for 4.5 hours, you're racing for 9, 10, 11 hours. And that's a completely different game. My mindset's one that I don't like to go to just make up numbers. I like to go because I want to be at the sort of the sharp edge of the racing. And I think until I've accepted that I've got to kind of learn my way into Ironman, I think it's probably best to stay away from it, because I think I could do myself more damage by having too high an expectation for my first couple of Ironman races. So at some point it's going to happen. I kind of feel it's inevitable. Everybody wants to go after the Kona dream at some point or another. But right now I'm happy with my Austria dream, if you like.
Yeah, cool. Fair enough. But you will be following the Kona race, I presume, this weekend. Yeah,
it's going to be interesting. I've seen a lot of speculation about who's up there from the pros, and I don't know. My personal feeling is it's more open than it's potentially ever been. I really, honestly don't have a favourite for the weekend, as in somebody I would put money on. I have my favourites in terms of people I would like to see well, and of course, on the girls, the Brits are so strong. I think, hopefully they will do well. And on the men, I honestly haven't got a clue who's going to do well, but I think it will be an interesting one for sure.
Yeah, cool stuff. All right. Well, thanks for your time, Matt. Maybe to finish things off, how can people get in touch with you?
Absolutely. You were already kind enough to mention triathletesdiary.com, which is a website that I run that has the blog that you mentioned, but also we do gear reviews, and there's a few advice articles up there if you're new to triathlon and want to trust me to actually give you some advice. But I think the most sort of easy access place to find me is on Twitter. So I'm simply M_J_Fisher, and I'd love to say hi to everybody on that.
Yeah, cool. I will definitely put all these links in the show notes. Anything else you want to plug? You got some sponsors, I think, there as well?
Well, I couldn't end the podcast without first saying thank you to Endurance Junkie. I mean, it seems a bit trite on your own show to say what great kit you have, but I mean it very sincerely when I say the Sport Wool suit is a revelation. And if anybody out there hasn't tried it, you need to, because it's just a fantastic suit to race in, and I wouldn't be in anything else. The other guys that I'm very lucky to be associated with are the Skechers Performance Division for their shoes, Elevar for nutrition, and 110% for the compression. And again, if you haven't tried compression with ice, you're missing out. Something to try. But don't get hung up on the sponsorships, guys. Just go with the brands that you believe in and that you trust. And I'm very lucky to be associated with the ones that I believe have great products.
All right. Thank you very much, Matt. Much appreciated. Enjoy the off season. And all the best for next season.
Thanks, Peter.